you very much. Much appreciated. Okay, now we're here.
And we're present, which is perfect because this is what we're talking about today is all things awareness, consciousness, presence, and really why we incorporated that aspect into all of our programming, which most people come to us and they want help with nutrition and food or maybe exercise. But really this beautiful thing that comes out of all of it is heightened awareness and consciousness. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and then some.
Yes, and I believe this is probably one of our favorite topics, really, that we really like to dive into because it applies to everything. Absolutely everything.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
let's do it. You were going to ask me a question to start.
So, well, just a slight backstory. When you and I first started working together and you were coaching me and sharing all this amazing nutrition information with me, the last thing I thought about was finding a newfound personal connection to my highest self. And that was such a strange, like, side outcome that I wasn't expecting at all. So I want to ask you and hear from your channeled words of what is awareness to you? And then how is like food as a vehicle for creating more consciousness and awareness? Like, where did that drop in for you? Or like, how did you figure that out in your?
This is an amazing question. So, awareness for me is our ability to make the unconscious conscious, to be present to what our habitual patterns and beliefs and mechanisms might be that are just operating in our subconscious behaviors. So when we have awareness of something, we are witnessing it. In my experience, we're witnessing it from a place of being the observer and not being run by the thing itself. So as an example, and this is something that we do in the second part of our coaching program, is we really invite individuals to bring awareness into their relationship with food, and not in the sense of, well, everyone has a very unique relationship, and that is actually part of the discovery, because it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's just being aware of what that relationship is. For a very simple example, my dad's relationship with food, when I asked him what it was what he ate in a day, and that he likes food. And that was perfect. It's very straightforward. It's like, this is what I have for breakfast. That's my relationship. It's very clear. There was no real, like
Emotional attachment or yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it wasn't an emotional experience for him. Maybe he gained pleasure at times, but that wasn't his experience of it. And that I can see in my father in different areas of his life. He's very present and not necessarily attached to many things. And my mom, on the other hand, when I asked her about her relationship to food, she really understood that for her it's fuel, and sometimes she likes to get it done with and over with so she can move on to the next thing. So there's like this urgency, and sometimes like this is getting in the way for me, so, and we look at this, and this really feeds into just being aware of our relationship to something that we do so frequently in the day. And inside of the Green Door Life, inside of opening this door for clients to experience, we get to bring awareness to something that we do generally in an unconscious state so many times every single day of our life. So it creates this access point to really sit there and be present and give ourselves the opportunity to notice what we're thinking, what we're feeling in our body. Do we know where our food is coming from? Do we actually like the taste of this food? Which is a really interesting one, because I feel that most often after we've had our first bite or two, after that, you really don't know what it tastes like anymore. You're just eating, right? So it's like when you crave something, all you really need is that first bite. And then the craving is generally satiated, unless you're craving a sense of fullness. And then that's a different story, right? It's a volume that's in your stomach. It's a volume that's in your body. And then from there, we have the access point of, well, what are we really looking to fill? right? And what is that fullness that we want to feel? And how are we using food to create the fullness that could really be supported in a different way, maybe emotional or environmental or relationship or whatever it might be. So, and I remember one of our conversations about getting second servings of things. You remember that?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Story of my life.
Would you like to share anything about that experience that you had? Just the awareness of it?
What a beautiful process for me. So really what I came to find through the whole experience was I had trust issues with food and myself. And so it wasn't for me. Not only did I want to get the eating part over with, like similar to what your mom was saying, I was also, all the thoughts and feelings that I was having while I was eating the food was worry. Like first and foremost was, is this food going to make me fat? Is this food going to make me sick, ill? Because there's so much information out there now of like, don't eat this and don't eat this. And if you eat too much of this, this is going to happen. So there was this constant just worry and a mistrust of like, so disconnected from food and not understanding how nutrition worked, and then definitely not understanding how it worked in my unique body. So even in going through the program, I was struggling because I didn't trust the process. It was very scary to me. I was so used to not eating all day, so that when I did come to the evening times, I would have second and third and fourth helpings. One, because I was starving. But two, what you and I unpacked together was this was a habit from childhood. So dinner was always I come from dual Italian families on both sides of my parents' backgrounds. So food was the epicenter. It's the hub. It's the pulse of the entire culture and household. And dinner was the biggest meal, which now we know it should be flip-flopped. Breakfast should be, for most people, they do much better with stacking their calories at the very beginning of the day. You have more energy. You're going to more likely to burn it off. And you want to actually eat the least at night. So growing up, ours was flip-flopped. And I also had this total like drop in memory, like the ones where you're like, I am there. I'm literally there. I'm a little 12-year-old sitting around the table with my two brothers and my parents. And I'm watching myself get up and going to get second and third helpings because that's what my brothers were doing. And they were sitting there shoveling their food as fast as they could because they're playing like 10 sports and super active and starving. And I remember thinking in my little kid brain, oh, if I have more food, mom and dad are going to love that. And they're going to love me. And they're going to give me praise for like, you have a hearty appetite. Like, good job. You finished your plate. That was a big thing. And so it was so interesting to use that part of our program, that awareness piece, to kind of unpack not just your relationship with food, but then I started to see that pattern in every other aspect of my life. And I was like, oh no. I was like, I do everything to the extreme. Oh, if I just do this more, I'm going to get results faster. I'm going to get whatever I'm looking for quicker. And that could not be further from the truth.
Oh my gosh. So this is such a good topic. Well, there's two things here, Lisa, which I really, really appreciate. The first, just when we have an awareness of the emotional state that we're in when we're digesting, like think about how that affects our digestion. So when we're in a state of fear and anxiety about whatever it is that we're consuming, it automatically, like I feel it in my body, it automatically creates this tight, constricted state. And then I'm like, okay, so then what does it feel like to be in gratitude and like awe and appreciation of the beauty of what we are able to consume? And just noticing that shift is like such a massive thing. And in our society right now, of course, you know, obviously anything that's quick and easy is always what we're generally looking for, because we're in this society of like faster, more, like it's never enough, just do. And I feel like now we're having a little bit of a shift in that area. But what I've started to understand, like through this, our own cycle and watching how clients go through their journeys, is that what you're pointing to here is the state that we're in when we're actually digesting also matters so much. So we not only have like the emotional and thought triggered state that we're in eating and in all moments of our life, but then we also have that unconscious need or desire that we're sometimes fulfilling from an unconscious state, right? And then that aspect and the invitation of becoming the observer then gives us this doorway to go, oh shit, how long have I been doing that for? Oh crap. And then when we realize that, just as you were pointing out, it opens up this whole doorway of, oh my gosh, I do that everywhere in my life.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. And so your question earlier of where this kind of concept dropped in, I actually don't remember. I think it was really that I just kept seeing the cycle unfold with clients time and time again. And it just became rather obvious.
Yeah.
We do one thing, we do all things, we eat so frequently, it's going to show up here.
Right.
And it does, and it did, and it will continue to do so. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because would you say, in your experience, when you first learned about nutrition and you started balancing and looking at macronutrients and whatnot, I feel like I always look at you as, I feel like you didn't really have, like, you just needed the information and you were like, great, this is happening. It wasn't, I get a sense that for you, food wasn't like an emotional coping mechanism, or you didn't use it like as this vehicle to numb yourself or to check out, or it wasn't like wrapped up in your family culture, or there were no really significant beliefs around it for you besides like, well, almost like utilitarian, like get it in, get it done, and let's move on.
Yes. And this is a really funny thing. Okay. So actually, since Halloween is coming up, this is a great example of relationship to food. So when you trick-or-treated when you were younger, what did that look like for you?
Oh my gosh. Get as much candy as you can. Although I have a theory about Halloween. I think kids really, really love it because it's almost like a job.
Huh?
And if you think about it, it's like they're excited that they're empowered of like, how many houses can I get to and like collect all these things? Or at least I've noticed that with my kids, that they know they're not getting to eat a whole bag of candy, but they're just excited to like collect it all. So I kind of feel like there's a little bit of that in there. But for me, once we got all the candy, it was like mom would only let us have, 1 to 2 pieces. And then we'd try and sneak as much as we could and then binge eat. And then I remember a couple occasions of eating till I threw up, which was pretty disgusting. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So
you.
right. So what I'm hearing there is, oh God, it's so fascinating to me. What I'm hearing there is that not only was it like, okay, how much can I get? But then once you had it, then it was restricted.
Yes.
And then in that restriction, then there was kind of this like, well, you're restricting, but I'm going to do what I want anyways. And then when I do what I want anyways, I don't really have necessarily the guardrails yet. So I might go into excess.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. I've asked this question to a few other people and everyone has a very, very different response. And it's so interesting to me. So when you're speaking about the utilitarian aspect, 100% in this area. So of course, if you guys haven't heard anything about like our stories or anything before, but my mom was very, very, very healthy growing up. And we didn't have much in terms of candy or sweets at the house, like at all. So when we did have like Christmas that was at my grandmother's house or, Halloween, it was like, okay, this is my opportunity. So what I would do with that opportunity is I would get my dad to go out like at the very beginning when houses were open. Like I would be like, okay, when is our first house? And we would go out like 4:30, people are going to start serving at 4:30. And then we would stay out until like 11, like until they closed their doors.
Wow.
And I remember going back to the house and organizing. So putting everything, and it's like, you have like your chewy stuff, and then you have like your Snickers, and then gummy bears and whatever. And I would make it last as long as possible. I remember I hid it in my closet, and I would have
Wow.
like a piece every day or every other day.
Oh my God. Okay. Wait, this is making so much sense. Yes. Okay.
So not only was I understanding that this would not be something that I would be able to experience, but because it was a scarcity experience, I was then like, okay, well, I'm going to make this work for me as long as possible and prolong the enjoyment.
Okay. This is amazing. So there's a book I read last fall called The Hungry Brain, and in I forget the author's name at the moment, but we'll put it in the show notes. He talks about the two types of people. Literally, this is you and this is me. It's the one type that, just like you said, you can regulate and you need that flexibility. Otherwise, you feel deprived. And then so you can self-regulate, you can postpone things, you can stretch it out. You don't need to get it all in at one time. And then there's other people like me who have much more addictive personalities where that like shut off valve is just not there. And especially for like certain foods and certain activities, like it lights up our reward center like crazy. And we need that. We don't do well with too much flexibility, is like not good for us. So my kind of thing with sweets and desserts and everything now, I'm like, when I crave that, which is very rare now, I will make it macro friendly. I will add protein. I'll make sure it has a little fiber. Or if I really want like the real thing, I will have it outside of the house at a restaurant and make it this experience and really be present and enjoy it and not feel guilty about it. But there is no way that shit is going to be in my house, because then, like, this is what I was telling my husband. If there are like super processed sweets and desserts in the house, I cannot stop thinking about it. I will lay in bed and I will think about the cookies, even if I'm physically full and I ate super balanced all day. It's like in my brain of like, that thing is down there. It's talking to me from the cabinets. And it's like, now that my husband and I made an agreement last fall, I was like, I'm expressing to you how this feels, and I don't want that shit in the house. And he was like, wow, I had no idea. He's more like you. He can regulate. And now since it's been gone, I'm like, I feel like a new person because I don't have to think about that stuff. It's like, I don't have to use that willpower, right? So this is fascinating into like the psychology of like some of these kind of cravings and why we eat. Because we don't always eat when we're hungry. That's not
No.
the only reason at all, So kind of unpacking that.
And what's beautiful about this, and this is when we talk about awareness and being the observer, is that like before I was able to recognize this kind of utilitarian aspect and understand really what it was doing and what I could use it for. And before you were able to realize like, oh no, this thing is happening inside of my body and my mind. And when we're aware of what it is, we don't need to make it wrong in any way, but we can learn how to work with it and treat it like it's a friend that now we've introduced into our life. We're not trying to keep them outside of the house and being like, no, we're just going to pretend that you're not at our door.
Right.
But we can really kind of go, okay, I know this about me. So when I do choose to do this, I know the environment that's going to be the most supportive of using this experience that shows up. So that's really where the observer, both in our relationship to food and our relationship to really anything in our life and our habitual patterns, can be of such an incredible support for us. But in order to become the witness, we have to allow ourselves the time to be present with what actually is happening. And it's so difficult to do that when we're always on the go, when we never really have the space to self-reflect and ask ourselves what we're really feeling, or even if we don't feel safe to do that, right? If there's any sort of block where like, well, I don't want to know what's in there, because sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're not ready for that.
Yes.
You're like, no, I'm like, that door, it's going to be closed for a bit. We're gonna wait on that one, and that's okay too, because it's like it unravels in cycles. Um, this is why I love this topic, because it just keeps going, just
Yeah.
keeps unraveling. So inside of this, and inside of kind of what we are doing with the programs that we're running, is of course people come to us with the idea of, okay, I have a certain goal around how I want to feel in my body, how I want to look in my body, long-term health goals, getting cholesterol levels or blood sugar levels in a different direction. But what they don't necessarily realize, some of them do, but what they don't necessarily realize is that there are conditioned programming that we have from traumatic experiences or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be trauma, really, but anything that shows up, where it will show up inside of the program. And
Yes.
that's the coolest part, because the program itself is exactly the same, but everyone has their own very unique experience, because it's a reflection of where they're at right now. And that, I feel, is the most just incredible thing. It's so cool.
If you and I took the section of our course on food awareness and kind of excavating some of these beliefs, we would have completely different answers than our original answers like 4 years ago, because it's so different now. And every now and then I'm texting you and I'm just like, I am so happy. I just feel this peace with my body and relationship to food that, again, only got here by learning about true nutrition science, all the craziness around what to eat and what not to eat, just kind of like chilling out about that. And really focusing on, the science of nutrition, how to fuel my body, and feeling good about like getting really in tune with what actually feels good in my body for me, because that's different than each person has their own experience. But when it relates to, in terms of things coming up for people, like maybe old beliefs or old traumas that might come up through the course, can you share more on that, of like what trauma means to you, kind of like a general definition, and then what are some of the, like, how does that come up through food? It's such an interesting connection there.
Yes, it really is. And it's going to be interesting for me as well, because like, as you said, and maybe there's still more for me to explore and discover here, but my relationship to food is a little bit more utilitarian. Don't get me wrong, I love food and I love creating beautiful meals. I love appreciating where food comes from. I love understanding what it's doing in my body. I love noticing how it feels in my body. But when I think of trauma, I really think of a mechanism and a way of which we've created a block or a density in our body to survive something. And generally, the survival of something has either been something that's happened physically or something that has been created in our mental awareness. So sometimes the trauma in some of the things that I've worked through has shown up as a story that I've created to help to keep me safe in a moment in time, right? So one of the stories that I had for a long time was, no one can protect me. I'm not safe with anyone else. I have to do it on my own. And so then you can imagine that story would then say, well, I mean, let's just look at food, for example. I will take care of ordering at every restaurant.
Yes.
Because I know it feels good in my body and I don't trust anyone else to know what that is.
Right.
So it could show up in ways like that. I'm totally happy for people to order, but I will also have a very specific desire.
Yes. Yes.
I trust Jeff to order. I also trust you to order.
I love when you order for me. I swear, after we went to that Sean Brock dinner, that was like a light bulb moment. And I've really been enjoying ordering dinner now for some reason. It was, I think, because we were so freaking present, because all the dishes were so small and intentional. And got this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. But to the point of kind of looking and watching how these kind of traumas show up. And I wouldn't necessarily call it trauma necessarily. I feel like trauma can sometimes be like kind of this hard and like charged word, like it feels
Big.
heavy and yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say more so a way of being that is still running the show for us in certain areas. So part of the trigger.
Yeah.
Um, and in that case, we will, like you and I talk about this all the time, but we'll be able to hear almost from an energetic place when something feels like it's being shared or expressed that doesn't actually belong in the moment in reality.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, I'm trying to think of a I'm trying to think of a good example, but we'll usually, oh, yeah, do you have one?
I was going to say, like, I just heard this the other day. And so, again, looking at my experience when I first came into this, I had in my head a list of good and bad foods.
Mm-hmm.
This is good. This is bad. I was still eating what was on the bad list. And then I was feeling really fucking bad about it. Now, when I hear clients say those words, ooh, it sticks out. Like it gives me chills. Like I can feel it almost like a physical poke. And I'm like, I know that. I know that story. That was the story I used to have.
Right.
And so, to your point, it could be food, it could be around money, it all kind of ties together. And if you boil it down to, some teachers out there explain everything like there's two vibrations for everything. It's like love and not love, expansive and constrictive, abundant and scarce. And it's like, which one? Of course, there's all the flavors in between, but that was like that kind of dichotomy of very polarized extreme thinking. Now it sticks out to me like a sore thumb, and it could be multiple topics,
Great example. And absolutely about in terms of the polarization, it's like we're not in the present moment, because when someone will be like, oh, well, that's bad, that cookie is bad, then we'll be like, well, why do you say that? And where does that belief come from? And not to say that, a cookie is good or bad, because only our belief makes it whatever we're saying it is. And what is good and what is bad about it? It tastes good. When you say bad for what?
Yeah.
Bad in excess, maybe, but one cookie, probably not going to do much. So then we're having to like unravel the beliefs. And then once we're doing that as well, then we can start to see how we can be more sensitive to how that kind of vocabulary shows up in so many other areas of our life, whatever that pattern is. And that is then further coming back into the witness perspective of, as we do one thing, we do all things. But if we're not present to where programmed dialogue or unconscious beliefs are coming in, then it's really difficult for us to change the behavior. And that is such an incredible thing.
I love one of the beautiful teachings you shared with me, like from the get-go, was getting curious, and just taking a moment to pause. I have a little sticky note right next to my computer, and it says, close your eyes, pause. It's okay to take time and get curious, because so often we're wanting to fill in that space, wanting to rush, going, when you're always constantly rushing and worried, and you're pre-paving a future that you don't want, but also just rushing through life is expediting your death, which I read somewhere. I was like, ooh, that's good. And it's like being present is really the heaven. It's in the now. It is the ultimate expansive gift.
Yes.
So I love I remember when you first were sharing that perspective of, hey, like, instead of judging and like automatically going to these old beliefs, what if you got curious about it? And then it's like becomes this little thread of like, okay, where is this going?
Yes.
Why am I using those labels? Where does that belief come from? And I think that's where, when you talk about doing the work and getting curious about that kind of stuff, it doesn't have to feel so heavy when you look at it from a detached perspective, and you're kind of like, you're just following the thread and you're excavating a little bit. And then you'll start to just being aware of what some of those limiting beliefs or traumas, which to me is just an unprocessed emotional experience. It could be extreme, it could be little. Like one of mine that we unpacked together with my whole family a couple of years ago when we hopped in a van and lived in a van for about a year was I had a trauma around spills and messes. No joke. And this is like, it's so simple, but it was like really a big thing for me. So anytime, and mom and dad, if you're listening, I love you. There's no resentment. Do not blame my parents or anything, but it was like, I was in this routine of like, I think I spilled my milk every night for like weeks and months, and became this thing where like everyone in my family would tease me about it when I was a kid. And it was like, I know my husband had the same reaction. And then it was almost like, pre-paving, it was going to happen now. And I would just spill all the time. And then I was so self-conscious, and I've carried that into adulthood of like spills are a big thing. And even my husband noticed it when my parents were visiting. He's like, oh my God, your parents really have a thing about spilling. It's like, just like not chill. And then we were laughing. I told them about it and they were like, yeah, that comes from their parents' generation. Where like, if you spilled in things in the 1950s and 40s, you probably got spanked, at least in my family. So we took that and I shared with my kids and my husband all about that. And then we worked on it that year. They were knocking things over on purpose and just like triggering me left and right, and it healed it. And now I laugh about it because I'm like, okay, it's not a big deal. It was just literally, it was something that was like stuck in my body of like, this is not okay. And now it is. Ridiculously small, trivial example, but that's, that can be a reflection of doing the work on some of these bigger traumas.
Absolutely. And then just you having the awareness that was something that was present in you, a feeling of that comes up in those moments, and then seeing that your family, that it's like a whole family feeling that comes up. And then essentially like we take the feeling of our parents.
Yes.
And it was wrong for them. Well, that means it's wrong for us. And there's something you were saying inside of this that was about, like pulling on the string. And I think what's really cool and what I'm hearing, especially with you over the last year, and I see it with myself also, is that when we're the witness and the observer, we're watching ourselves like we're an actor in a movie. Yeah. Instead of feeling like we are the experience, right? Then, because when we are the experience, it gives us this grant to essentially be wrong, to make ourselves wrong, right? Mm-hmm. If I am this and this is not quote unquote right, or this was not expected or appropriate or whatever, connotation we want to add to it, then it's us that is making it right or wrong. Where we are observing ourselves, then we can have more grace and forgiveness and curiosity to be like, wait, why am I doing that? And right. Like, how long have I been doing that for? And like, where did that come from? And just getting like really curious about it. And this I can loop into the NMRT thing now because it's very applicable. This actually, I'm just literally working on something that I had a better awareness about. So past weekend, we had a practitioner for a manual therapy modality called NMRT, which is neuromuscular release therapy. And I was attracted to this because part of it is that we hold this trauma and emotions in our tissue. So I'm always looking for, do we actually have to talk it out, and do we actually have to process it in this way? Or can it be literally released from our physical body? Because we've all kind of, or I have, and I know you've had just like physical releases before. Whether it's even through things like orgasm or training or stretching or accomplishing something, whatever it might be, we both store them in our body and we'll hold tension in certain areas of our body, sometimes carrying the weight of the world or other people's expectations or whatever it might be. But so in this course of this practice, it was 12 hours of body work, which is really wild. And
Well, 12 hours of anything that's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. But what was fascinating about this is that when certain points of tension, when he arrived in certain points of tension, I would see and feel a memory or a thought, like an image that would come to mind. So it kind of felt like I was watching a movie of my life over the course of 12 hours. And on the first day, the movie was all about my voice and feeling strong in my voice. And what I noticed as the witness is that when I feel like something isn't right, instead of saying, that doesn't feel right to me. I don't know why, but there's just something about it that doesn't feel right. I will move to ask questions for the other person. I will move to be like, well, why would you want to do that? And well, tell me more about where actually those questions are actually for me.
That's so interesting.
Right. So what doesn't feel right about that for you, Shannon? Like what? And so what I've been doing is I only had a certain set of tools, which was, okay, if this doesn't feel right for me, in order to be safe, I need clarity. And I need clarity, so I'm going to ask questions. And so as a result now, and it feels very immediate actually, which I'm so grateful. And it's kind of unraveling and integrating more and more each day. But I'm like, wow, that door of just saying, this doesn't feel right for me. I'm not sure what it is yet, but can you give me a second and I'll get back to you? That door has been there the whole freaking time.
Yes.
And I've been looking at this other door, thinking that was the only option I had, not really even being able to see that there's this other door. So part of it is just being given the space to process these things, having the awareness through the work that we've already been doing, and then going, oh my gosh, there's a different way. Just
Yes.
like what you're talking about with the spill, like whether it's like creating an environment where it's totally different and it gets to be funny and playful and like you make it a joke.
Yes.
Or it's just having like a manual therapy experience where you're like, oh my gosh, this is now okay. It's just, there isn't one way, but the aspect of awareness is such a beautiful gift that we can give ourselves. Wild.
Absolutely. I actually love that it's the outcome from the NMRT was so quick, because sometimes I feel like it can feel pretty heavy when you are kind of going through an awakening process and you're doing the work, and you have to come up for air every now and then and remember, okay, this is like the human experience. We're divine beings having a human experience. And part of the beauty of being here on this planet is also to experience pleasure, have fun, find joy, have love. So I do feel that there is a little bit of heaviness if you get too stuck in doing the work and too attached. I was also reading somewhere that it was like people who were constantly focused on shadow work and like, I need to heal and I need to heal the world and we're all broken and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that has just now become another mode of like hustle culture of like, I'm not doing enough and I need to heal more and like nothing's good enough. And it's like, okay, yes to doing the work and being conscious and aware and being in that growth mode and being open to like new experiences and being the best version of yourself, but also not getting stuck there. So I do love that it's like finding something that resonates with you that could be as quick as that, of like a physical release where it doesn't take a lot of mental, emotional therapy talk time and all this other stuff to get to this very quick realization and then immediate integration and then experiencing the benefits from that. I think that sounds amazing.
Yes. Absolutely. Right. It was amazing. And to your point, actually, Jeff and I were talking about this yesterday. I see personal development and these kinds of things like play. I see that nothing's broken. Yes. I see that it's a luxury. Like, I mean, are you kidding? 12 hours of body work, that's a luxury. That's like over. It's yes. Abundance. It's abundance, yes. Almost teetering on excess. But I hear what you're saying. And again, I think that has to do with like the vibration of the channel we're coming from. like whether there is something wrong that has to be healed, or whether we're coming from the place of this is providing me joy, discovery, curiosity, and it gets to be play.
Yes.
Right. So they could actually be doing the exact same thing. It's just the intention behind them. Is something broken and needs to be fixed? Or do you really just enjoy what you're doing?
Totally. Because
Yeah.
you can be like, ooh, what other little nuggets of old beliefs do we need to dig up and like take the trash out?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's just, and it's the same thing with like how we're full circle. It's the same thing with like how we create meals.
Mm-hmm.
We can either create a meal going like, oh my gosh, I have to cook this again. Like, oh, I never do it right. I always feel like I'm trying to improve my cooking skills and it never feels like it tastes right. And there's always going to be a way to make it better. That's one way. Or you can go in going like, oh my God, I'm so excited about making this recipe. I've been trying to like, tweak it and play around with it. And I'm really excited about the different ingredients I get and how they're so beautiful and fresh. And like, we have these opportunities for these different perspectives all the time.
Yes.
So,
and it's a choice. It's like, which one do you want to choose? I think people, sometimes it's hard to hear that you have a choice. You always have a choice. Even when you don't like the choices available, it's like taking that ownership over your life. Not everyone wants to do that.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Sometimes when I hear that and when I'm in a triggered state, you're like,
totally. You're like, doesn't feel like I have a choice.
Right. And you're like, see my face? Do you see this face? To that. Right. Yeah, but I mean, it is true in every moment.
And like, we can talk about this on another episode, but allowing yourself that space to feel those triggers and emotions and not judge yourself for it. And I think one of the things I really appreciate about having kids is I see it in real time and I get to watch them and be like, oh, that's how you're supposed to do it. That's how you're supposed to do it. You have an emotion. It comes out. It's energy in motion. They don't stuff it down. Yeah. They have, as long as their blood sugar is regulated, which we've got checked out through food, balancing food. But they have these emotions, big or small, they come out and then it passes. And really all we're doing as parents is holding that space, but it's so beautiful to watch, like, oh, that's how it's supposed to go. And then when, as adults, it's like, we're either trying to repress, numb, maybe we didn't have that kind of safe space to express emotions, especially the big negative ones. I know for me, I didn't really feel comfortable as a kid having those big negative emotions. So I just kind of, everything was stuffed and then I would write it in my journal. But allowing yourself that space to have those emotions, and sometimes 99% of the time, I like to do that by myself. I'm like, nobody watch me. I just need a moment. And then you can pull out and be the observer. And sometimes you laugh. Like I'll come back and apologize to my husband and be like, I totally had a toddler tantrum. I am so sorry. Like, and he's like, why are you sorry? It's no big deal. I'm like, I can do better. And then it's like, or you can just have the emotion and not judge yourself for it. And then life moves on.
Yes. And what a beautiful space it is to be in relationship where you have that understanding with each other that it's just an emotion passing, and like, wow, just to like allow it. My ear's ringing, which is really interesting. I feel like that's just a confirmation going like, yes, you can just have the emotion and let it be. And to have that space held for both of you to just be able to have that. Yes, I'm still very much working on that, having that grace for myself. It was much easier over this past weekend just to be like, oh, this is showing up, because it just moves through you, energy, emotion, just like you said, not being triggered by anything specifically outside of just something moving through your body.
Right. It's not you. You're having the experience, but it's not at your core who you are. You are not your emotions and feelings. You have them.
Yes. Like you're holding something in front of you.
Right.
Currently holding this for a period of time, and then I will release it.
Yes.
Yes. I think this is a lot that we covered today.
Yes.
All
It's
right.
so good though.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you for whoever has joined us today. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it. We hope that these are helpful and you guys are gaining insight or a reflection into your own personal experience. And again, if you have any topics that you are interested in hearing about further or that we haven't covered just yet, please DM us on Instagram, or you can send us an email at manifest@thegreendoorlife.com. Or I believe that's it. Anything else, Lise?
I think that's good for today. Ground this weekend. We got a full moon coming. Pluto's coming direct. All sorts of funsies. So lots of grounding this weekend is on the list.
I love it. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Me
All
too.
right, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.